Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review the Garbage Pail Kids movie. So, I, of course, was to have seen, like, the VH1 show, like, I love the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, so on and so forth. And at some point, they would go on and talk about, like, Cabbage Patch Kids, but then they would also talk about the Garbage Pail Kids cards, and how, of course, these things would just be very gross and grotesque and dark and weird and goofy. And for me, like, all of a sudden today, while I was just kind of thumbing through things to watch, I somehow just stumble upon this film, and I was like, okay, like, I remember what the Garbage Pail Kids were. There were these goofy cards, and so I'm like, immediately I need to just have this movie in my life to check it out. And, like, I really could care less if this movie was to be a dumpster fire, garbage humor, or that it was trash. I wanted to just, like, check this out regardless. And I have to admit, this movie does feel like uh, the people that was to create this whole thing originally, they just wanted their product in another medium so people could see it, and I get that. I also honestly get the fact that they probably could not figure out what to actually do with these Garbage Pail Kids in this film. It feels like a very like missed opportunity to have this like come more off as being like a Gremlins kind of movie, and instead it ends up being like the Garbage Pail Kids team up with this kid who's being bullied to bizarrely come up with fashion clothes. And I'm like, okay, that's a very odd idea. You just need a group of kids who need something to do, and so fashion clothes is one of them. And these kind of, at some point, these clothes do kind of come off as kind of like a Michael Jackson kind of design or style. If you kind of go on and you look at Michael Jackson in concert, and you look at like some of the clothes that Dodger was wearing in this film, they look fairly similar in a lot of ways. But so I had fun with this film because I knew that with it not being the most relevant thing, I was just going like, you know what, like, let's just see how goofy this is. Let's just see how they just use these characters and like do something odd and something that I can just kind of take my brain and kind of put off to the side and just enjoy. So that's what the Garbage Pail Kids movie is. It's not something for you to go on and be like, man, this movie is groundbreaking. No, you're just going on and be like, okay, like this is goofy and unique and fun. So with this one, we have these, of course, Garbage Pail Kids who are to consistently playing around with they want to eat toes or people's limbs or just eat people. We have like Alligator, the character here, that goes on and is to like eat eyes in certain portions of this film. And not from actually straight from a person, he just has this kind of like lunchbox like thing, and he's just kind of like, and they're like, eh. We have Garbage Pail characters who fart and have boogers and are to be nerdy and have acne and all kinds of stuff for this film. We have Greaser Greg, who of course is to be like one of these kind of like tough characters. And so we go on and we have these kind of wild barrage of these Garbage Pail Kids, And at some point, they are trying in this movie to look for other Garbage Pail Kid characters, but then oddly, it seems like they completely forget about that. And I was like, okay, like I'm like, what was the point of that? They were supposedly looking for other Garbage Pail Kids, but then they completely even forgot about it, and they're just like, oh yeah, like let's kind of wrap this movie up, let's get out of here. um I was a little confused about that, about why they took that time just to turn around and just be like, yeah, like we couldn't produce more of these uh Garbage Pail Kids. So with that said, um this movie to me was like a big old uh like fun film. I would have to go on and say that this movie is like in between like okay and bad. So like fun is to be just in there, cuz it just kind of fits like a goofy film that really goes on and is to uh like try something and probably fails miserably, but still, um, it was something that I just had enjoyment just watching. So, where can you go on and find the Garbage Pail Kids movie? Well, really, it's to be fairly unique, because of course there are a certain number of bootleg apps that might have this movie available. At first hand, I would go on and state that you can go into a Google Play Store, and hopefully this app may still exist. It's an app called Doxy, Doxcy. More than likely, if you go on to a Google search, if you don't find Doxy, you may find an equivalent to this app via the search engine, or I would probably recommend just going through a Google Play Store search and just search the word movie apps. At some point, you're going to go on and find an app that can specifically have you watch this film, and then you can go on and have like a one off experience with a certain app, or continue on to go and watch a number of things for absolutely free. Next thing that I would go on to recommend is Box, and then space in between, UHD. I think on a Google Play Store, this app doesn't exist, but there's another app equivalent where it says like Fox HD Movies. You can go on and download that, and it'll be the same app. So the logo will say Fox HD Movies. So, but definitely search the words Box space UHD. Um, Other than that, there might go on and be several different Google searches that you can go on and do, and try to find apps like Yes Movies, or go on and possibly find stuff like uh, 123 Movies in a Google Play Store. At some point, you might just need to like find the correct one where the app works, because there are several different variations where it's like certain servers don't work, or certain other goofy things. Or you can probably find the Garbage Pail Kids movie through Amazon. You could probably rent it or buy it for fairly cheap. Uh, Probably buy it because I don't think it's available on Amazon. So go ahead and try to do that. So with that said, let's just go on into that double five time territory, because Garbage Pail Kids time. Let's go into spoil time. Spoil time, it's about the time we do spoil this movie. So, the Garbage Pail Kids. So, in the beginning of this film, we come to find out that the Garbage Pail Kids are getting out of this can and running rampant within this antique store. And so, as they end up hearing Captain Manzini, very odd character, who is to make his way back into the antique store, all of the Garbage Pail Kids jump right back into the garbage. And so the captain, who of course is to realize that maybe these kids are getting out, he ends up putting this huge, heavy, uh, like kind of old, what would be like scuba diving equipment, this huge helmet. He ends up putting upon this garbage to keep these garbage pail kids from getting out. So we then have Dodger that makes his way into this antique store. I'm not quite familiar with what the relationship is between Dodger and Captain Manzini. Like I'm assuming that like Dodger is just like his uncle or something. It's some weird, goofy relationship. And so it feels like this kid like isn't working here. It just feels like he's just kind of there. So we have Dodger that goes on into this antique store, and we oddly have Captain Manzini, who I don't really uh, feel actually sells anything in this store. Especially when Captain Manzini is to not sell like these garbage pail kids to get rid of them, but instead he is to just kind of hold them there. So, because how could he sell just a garbage can? Because that's all like people could really see. So we have Dodger who ends up going on to get bullied by this guy named Juice, and so we then find Dodger, who is with uh, Tangerine, because instead of giving a person a normal name, you have to go on and give them a name like Tangerine or Juice or any kind of weird, goofy thing. Like the one girl who's the bully, who's kind of wearing this um, kind of like zebra pattern like tank top, or like a tiger like stripe. Her name is Blythe. So we have to have some weird goofy names for every single one of these characters. I don't know why. So we have Tangerine that is to be looking through the window of this store. And so Dodger comes up with a reason for Tangerine to come into the store, that maybe Tangerine can go on and find something here that she can collectively uh, tie into her clothes. Uh, and so Dodger brings Tangerine in to go on and look at these like pins or these buttons or these items. And so at one point, Tangerine is to find this one like bead or this one like pin, as we had Dodger who was to kind of poke his finger, and Tangerine is to ask like, well, hey, what are you going to do as an encore? Like, open up a vein. So we have Tangerine who is to ask about how much this one item is worth, and Dodger goes on and just closes her hand and just to say it's like, that one's for free. That one's on the house. So we then all of a sudden have Juice and his bullies wanting to go on and take on Dodger yet again. And this kid actually is to like fight pretty well. Even though he is to at some point just get outnumbered, still he ends up defending himself pretty well. To the point where when like Blythe ends up kicking him, this girl's leg ends going through this ladder, and so like we have Dodger who kind of gets away and is to figure out how to defend himself. But at some point, we then go on and have this trash can, as well as this this aquatic helmet that ends up getting knocked over, and the trash ends up starting to ooze out. And that, of course, is when we get the garbage pail kids that end up making their way out of this garbage pail. So they go on and they look at the ooze and like, ew, what is that? And so we have Juice and his bullies take Dodger, and they weirdly have to take him down into a sewer and unleash unleash this valve that starts spraying on this kid. And I'm like, what are you trying to turn him into the Joker? Like, what are you trying to do here? What is the point, to just make this kid smell? Like, it seems that oddly enough, whatever they're trying to do is just make this kid smell bad for some goofy reason. That's all that they can really do. But it seems that the point here is that we have to showcase some stuff that certain characters are going to use later. Like, we have the Garbage Pail Kids who go down the sewer later on to adjust these valves to play against the uh, Juice and Blythe and stuff later on. Like, we have at one point where there's a scene where Juice is taking a dump in the bathroom. He's in the toilet, and the Garbage Pail Kids are adjusting the lever, and all of a sudden, like, the water in the toilet just shoots out, and Juice is like, "Oh my god!" And he's flying up in the air as he's to be shot out of this toilet. And we had the one moment where the two other bullies are in the jacuzzi, and all of a sudden, like, the Garbage Pail Kids are adjusting the lever, and all of a sudden we now have the jacuzzi that has like brown water in it, and I'm like, "Hey, what's going on?" So that's the whole point of the whole, like, getting even kind of thing. So the Garbage Pail Kids decide to go on and try to do the right thing here. And so they make their way down the sewer to find this kid who is getting just sewage and water just hit on him. And so they take the kid and they bring him back. And so they realize that, like, hey, let's help this kid because he's being bullied. Let's do the right thing here. So they bring him up, and so we have Captain Manzini, who finds out that the garbage pail was to be opened, and now that these characters are all like they're out in the world, and so Manzini is to be upset with Dodger, and Dodger's like, I don't know what happened, like, I don't know what you're talking about. And so Manzini is to tell Dodger, it's like, okay, well, hey, like, clean up, because, man, do you really smell. And so he goes on and gives him this thing that looks like a dress that he had gotten from this certain country somewhere. And so, come to find out, the Garbage Pail Kids do come back. And then so Captain Manzini is trying to figure out a spell or incantation that is to try and get these Garbage Pail Kids back into this garbage. And so we consistently have Manzini, who is coming up with all of these weird concoctions that Dodger is going to have to go and run and get, like a shadow of someone's smile or some other goofy thing, like the foot of a toe or some goofy, like, it's not like something you can go to like Target or Walmart or something and go and find. And so Manzini ends up saying, it's like, well, hey, that's the reason why, like, nobody does spells anymore, is because the ingredients are difficult to figure out or get to. So no one does spells anymore. So come to find out, we have Dodger that goes with Tangerine, and Tangerine is to go near this club and try and sell all of her clothes. Because I guess, like, she buys all these clothes just to probably, like, wear them once, like a Paris Hilton, and then ends up getting the money for it. So, and plus also that probably tells you, like, Tangerine probably just like desperately needs money, and so she's selling her own shirt off her own back to get money. So all of a sudden we have Juice who notices Tangerine, and so Juice ends up taking Tangerine into this vehicle, and they drive off. While all of a sudden we see Dodger, who is left in this bag that was Tangerine, and Dodger ends up undoing the bag and then walks off, as he probably at some point is going to deliver this bag to Tangerine. But so it seems Dodger is to want to be with Tangerine, and is to like think of her as a girlfriend or a possible girlfriend. So when Dodger is to make his way back to the antique store, he then finally realizes that these Garbage Pail Kids have all come back, and he is to go on like, okay, yeah, like all of these characters are great. Nat the nerd who keeps wetting himself and peeing himself, and we have Wendy who keeps farting, and we have foul Phil who goes on and is to like ask us if anybody's his father or his mother, and it's like, no. We have Messy Tessie, who is to consistently just have a runny nose, as if she's always having a cold. Maybe it's allergy season for her 24/7, who knows. We have Alligator, who has a number of eyes or fingers or toes that he can just kind of munch on at any point. Greasy Greg is to be a character that has this like knife, or he's kind of the tough guy, and like there isn't an element besides that of which that he has. And then we have characters like Valerie Vomit that just on command to take down certain characters, or is to just at some point, and I'm like, okay, that's weird. So we have those characters that we're playing around with, and supposedly they end up talking that there is more characters, like certain banana characters or something like that, that they end up calling for in this garbage pail, but then they realize that they're not coming out. So as we have the Garbage Pail Kids who start talking to Dodger, we have them realize that, like, well, hey, we want to help this kid out because he's being bullied. So they decide that they all want to turn around and give Dodger like this really swanky looking coat to then meet up with Tangerine to impress her. And so they end up giving Dodger this coat, and then Dodger goes and meets up with Tangerine, and Tangerine's like, oh my god, this coat, it's amazing, like, where did you get this? And Dodger is to mention that he made it, even though the Garbage Pail Kids made it. And so Tangerine is like, oh my god, if you go on and you give me like 10 to a dozen different outfits that are all to be like this, like, I can go on and I can put on a fashion show, and I can go on and possibly make my fortune, my money, and my whatever. And when really looking at it, Tangerine, like, did not put these clothes together. So how is she gonna go on and become this fashionista or whatever, and all of a sudden have this massive clothing line? Is anybody just gonna go on and just take these first runs and kind of look at them as like templates, and are just like, okay, well, like, I'm gonna go on and connect myself to Tangerine, and we're just gonna make this line out of the exact same stuff that she's already done, and make like a whole like a whole like assembly line kind of thing of all of this clothing. So we have Dodger that goes back to the Garbage Pail Kids, and he's like, okay, like, it seems that Dodger now wants like a ton of clothing for these Garbage Pail Kids to make, and they're just like, well, hey man, like, we don't work for free, and we got to get something out of this. And Dodger's like, well, name it. And so it seems that the Garbage Pail Kids are to naturally assume if there's a certain number of characters that aren't in their garbage pail, that maybe someone had gone on and collected them, and that they are to possibly be in this institute for the ugly. That's where people, I guess, or certain characters are to be collected, kind of a like a dog catcher or something ends up going on to collecting certain animals that are kind of out in the wild. We have certain people that also collect these unusual characters that are to be deemed like too short or too pale or too bald or too something, and they end up just getting put into this institute for the ugly. And I was like, okay, that's bizarre. So we have Captain Manzini and we have Dodger, who try to make their way into this institute for the ugly, but they end up going into a snag where they try to get in there, and it seems that it's very well guarded and fortified, and so like, oh crap, we can't go on and get in here because like it's too fortified. So they then go back to the Garbage Pail Kids and they're like, well, yeah, like it's gonna be real tough for us to go on and get there. So we have at one point where the Garbage Pail Kids are to want to run amok in the town, that they're getting like cabin fever, and so we finally have Dodger break it to Tangerine of how these clothes are getting made, because we have a number of these Garbage Pail Kids that steal from this sewing company or this sewing store, this kind of like sweatshop, and they steal all these resources and start making all these clothes. And then Dodger has to finally admit to Tangerine that like these are the real people making the clothes. And so Tangerine's like, oh, okay. So Tangerine goes on to tell Juice that these Garbage Pail Kids are to be the culprits of this clothes making, and so Juice ends up stealing all the Garbage Pail Kids and sending them off to the Institute for the Ugly, so that way Juice can make some money off of them because they're too gross. So the Garbage Pail Kids are now in the Institute for the Ugly. They were also to, at some point, have the Garbage Pail Kids break out of this antique store, and they went off to go to this bar that's the toughest bar in the world, and we had both Wendy and we had both Alligator that go to this bar, and we have at one point where Allie goes on and bites off one of this guy's feet, and that all of a sudden starts this bar fight. And then all of a sudden one of the guys in the bar is like, well, hey, wait a minute, guys, like, these guys are cool, like, I like these guys, so hey, don't attack any of them. And they're like, oh, okay, yeah, like, we won't, let's buy them all beers and have a good time. And like, so much about this kind of feels like Sonic a little bit, like, especially the first one. Like, the second one went off and was like this, like, actually video game like movie, where the first one was just this bizarre a road adventure that I'm like, okay, what was that? Like, it was so bizarre. It was like any number of those like Woody the Woodpecker kind of goofy movies where they just have two characters meet and they have complications with one another, but then at some point they become the best of friends by the end of the film. It's really the way of which every single one of these kinds of movies happen. So, and they also have the Garbage Pail Kids also go into this movie where they're all just watching like the Three Stooges, and we have the Garbage Pail Kids that are stealing all these foods from all the other like people that bought these tickets for these movies as they snuck in to watch this. So we have the Garbage Pail Kids that are going on and like sneezing and blowing this popcorn to hit a bunch of people in the movie theater. I'm like, what the heck is going on? And so like a number of the moviegoers all just start to leave because they're like, what the heck? Like they're realizing that they're like getting their like hot dogs and popcorn getting stolen, and we have these Garbage Pail Kids that are making them uncomfortable by by kissing them and whatever. So, and calling them mommy. So, but I digress. We go on and we have the Garbage Pail Kids that go off into the Institute of the Ugly, and we finally have Manzini and Dodger who ends up rescuing Garbage Pail Kids while Tangerine's fashion show is going on. And so after Dodger and Manzini figure out a way to free these Garbage Pail Kids, and then all the weird other goofy characters that are too pale or too silly or too this or too that. So we free them, and they're like, okay, like, what are we gonna do next? And the Garbage Pail Kids are like, hey, we want to ruin Tangerine's fashion show because we worked really hard on those clothes, and like we want to get even with her. And Dodger and Manzini are just like, okay, fine, like, yeah, like, have you guys wreak havoc. So we have the Garbage Pail Kids who make their way to this fashion show and are to have this whole rack of clothes that comes out on the fashion show, and the person doing the fashion show is like, oh, I'm sorry, there was a mistake that happened here. And all of a sudden the Garbage Pail Kids rush out, and all of a sudden everybody's like, ooh, that looks gross. So we have Wendy that ends up farting. We have a number of characters that are all do their thing. We have like Nat the nerd, who's just kind of look gross with his acne. So we have at one point now that like Greasy Greg and all these other Garbage Pail Kids are dealing with Juice and his bullies. And so we have Valerie Vomit that goes on and pukes on Blythe and the other bully and takes them out. And so we finally have Dodger and Juice, and they're battling, but really all that they're doing is grabbing onto one another and rolling around. So we have it at one point where we had this one move where Alligator is to give like Dodger this boost to have him go like flying forward, and is to fall on top of Juice. It is to finally get his comeuppance and to take him out and punch him out. So it seems that all the bullies are to be finally to be dealt with, and even Tangerine is to get her fashion show ruined. And so Tangerine at the end of all this is to feel horrible of what she had gone on and done to Dodger, because technically those clothes were the Garbage Pail Kids, and also technically Dodger's. So Dodger really should have gotten on and gotten all the credit for what had happened there. So we have Tangerine afterwards that it's to talk to Dodger and like state it's like, well, hey, like I'm sorry about what I did to you and the Garbage Pail Kids. I feel bad about it. So how about we go on and like how about we hang out sometime? How about we like go and do something for fun? And Dodger ends up turning to Tangerine and is to state it's like, you know what, Tangerine, like I don't find you pretty anymore. Like I don't like you anymore. So no. Like you and I done. So I was like, yeah, yeah, Dodger, like stick up for yourself. And so we have Dodger that goes on to go back in the antique store. And so Captain Manzini is to finally have figured out how to forcibly have the Garbage Pail Kids to all go back in the garbage pail. And so he figures out that he can go on and at one point sing their song, but sing it backwards to suck them all into the garbage. And so he starts playing the song, and none of the Garbage Pail Kids are at all like fooling for this. And so they all go on to instead walk out the door and run off. And so Manzini is to be the only one who actually gets sucked into the garbage can, and he ends up like needing assistance to get out of it. So instead, all the Garbage Pail Kids just go on to these vehicles and they just drive off and they just have like fun in the night, and that's all that they do. So that ends up kind of finishing up the movie where like we have the Garbage Pail Kids just kind of ride off in the sunset. And so with that said, that technically does cover most of the film. So I'm just going to try and go on and just get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.